Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. My name is Jon Sanders. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and I want to welcome you to this episode, number 60. The title of this episode is Using a Podcast for Business and Ministry. And in this show, you're going to hear from our guest. His name is Chris Grainger, and Chris is the host of an awesome podcast. He's building an incredible platform that really ministers to men, to Christian men especially. And he's a great example of how to use what we would call in our Pastor's Roadmap to Financial Freedom, the signature course that Les and I have built together. We talk about three different pathways, one of them being the information-based pathway. And Chris would be a great model for that. How do you take a message, an idea, and get that out into the world, serve people with that, build an audience around that, and ultimately, how do you build a business around that? How do you monetize that and create a profitable business around that information that you're putting out into the world? So I'm excited for you to meet Chris and hear about how he's building his platform. Without any further ado, let's jump into this interview. Check this out. Well, Chris Grainger, welcome to the EntrePastors podcast, my friend. We're delighted to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. So, hey, what part of the world are you in today as we're talking?
I live officially in God's country of North Carolina. So it doesn't get any better as far as I'm concerned for this part of the U.S. But yeah, right in North Carolina, sir.
Born and raised?
Right on the line, actually. So I actually born and raised in Virginia, but we were about 2 miles from the North Carolina line. So I've always considered myself a North Carolinian, but made it official in 2012 when we moved down here. So just north of Raleigh is where we're located.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, hey, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'd love to unpack your story, your journey into pastoral world, and then also your entrepreneurial thing that you're working on today. So take it away, and I'll probably interrupt you along the way and go deeper into certain parts of it. But tell us about yourself.
By all means, jump in whenever you like. And first of all, I'm not a pastor. I am a deacon at our church, but I haven't done the seminary, but I just have a love of God's word. So I guess just to start with, from growing up, I didn't grow up in the church. And so I started going to church when I was 16, and I went to church when I was 16 because my girlfriend went to church. And I wanted to spend some time with her. So I definitely didn't have the right motivations, but it got me there. And that's where But Jesus got me when I got to that church. I fell in love with it. Their youth program.
That's called missionary dating, by the way. So
that's it, buddy. It worked too. It got me big time. And their youth department was great. And I ended up, just confessing him as Lord when I was 16, and then just kind of grew from there. But to be honest, Jon and Les, when I went to college, I drifted away, and I wasn't surrounded by believers, and I had the saying, I got this, I had that in my mind, and I stayed that way until I was probably in my early 30s. Well, right when my oldest daughter was born. And that's when I just remember being in the delivery room holding her, and it all changed. I was like, wait a minute, I don't got this. There's a lot more out there. And, just seeing his creation, what he created, and decided to start getting a little more serious, and got plugged into a church when we moved to North Carolina in 2012, and the church called Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, they wrapped their arms around us, and I needed it, and I didn't know how much I needed it, because about 2 years after we moved, I went through a divorce, and I found myself in the living room with a 3 and a 5-year-old little girls looking at me, and all right, Daddy, you got this, right? And I said, we're gonna figure this out. So I took the daddy hair classes and all that stuff to figure out what I needed to do to raise these girls, and the church wrapped their arms around me and really supported me and walked beside me through it, and it was just such a blessing. And then I was able to meet my current wife in 2016, and we got married a year later, and it was that right after we got married is when the church called me and said, you know what, there had been a vote, and we would like for you to consider being a deacon. And did not feel at all that I deserved that phone call, and almost just was shaking. And so I went through the deacon ordination and been serving there. We're getting ready to roll off the deacon board actually right now because it's 3-year terms. And but it's just it put in me a fire, guys, where I just wanted to learn and grow and teach and share. So I've taught classes. I'm now teaching Sunday school. I'm teaching a Bible study that I wrote. I have Bible studies, virtual Bible studies through the line within us. And it's just been a fire that I've been just very blessed to be a part of, and that kind of led me to the line within us and creating that earlier this year.
Yeah. Well, we'll jump into that. By the way, when you share your story about, being asked to serve as a deacon, I'll never forget when my church years ago came and asked me that. I was pretty young, probably in the grand scheme of things. I think I was 20 or 21 years old, and they asked me to serve as a deacon. And of course, my head kind of swelled up a little bit, thinking, of course, this is awesome. And then I get in the room and realize all this is just a bunch of people working. The only reason they reached out to me because I was serving in the church. They saw that I was active and serving, and it wasn't because they saw great leadership in me necessarily. They just saw a servant's heart. And so anyway, I learned that being a deacon didn't bring a lot of clout with it. It just was, it brought more responsibility and work. But anyway, so you got a heart for the ministry. Not everyone we interview on the show is in pastoral ministry. It's people that have a heart for the kingdom, a heart for the church, and but also are doing stuff out in the marketplace. So obviously, unless your church is different than most, the deacon's not a paid role, right? Like that's a volunteer serving thing. So what do you do beyond that? Outside of the church world, what do you do to support yourself? And then let's start unpacking the story of this platform that you're building.
Yes, sir. So I went to school at Old Dominion and studied engineering. So I have an electrical engineering background. And right out of school, I went to work for a company called Electrical Equipment Company, and we are a distributor that serves the industrial market. So I've been different roles through over 20 years at that company. Currently, I'm transitioning from engineering type role to actually a marketing role. It's kind of crazy path that it's taken the last few years, because I started a podcast for that company that started right in 2020. Actually, the end of 2019, I pitched it. So I'm sitting there with I think our COO and some vice presidents, and I pitched this idea of, a redneck from North Carolina. Let's start a podcast talking about electrical distribution and how we can serve others. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads, but then they said, yeah, go ahead and try it. And now we've had 200 plus episodes, and it's created a pretty awesome following. We've been downloaded in 6 of the 7 continents, and it's just crazy the opportunities that it's open for our company. But it gave me a chance to learn something new, and then so that's kind of what I do from a day job, if you will, is podcast marketing. Do a lot of writing and just trying to always think about. Even with that show, it's the theme is people and ideas over products. So we talk about the people and versus just trying to cram solutions down people's throats, and that's made it a lot more personable. And I think that's why it's been received so well.
Wow. So before we get off that, I just want to highlight a couple of things that I'm hearing in there, and that's first of all, never be afraid to create your own job description. I challenge pastors with this all the time. Like, don't sit around and wait for someone to give you a job description. You tell them what your job description is. And in this case, you went to your employer and just said, hey, what if we did this? And they were willing to pay you to do something that, they didn't have a job posting for, right? You created that position. And so I love that. And I also love the fact that it just shows that there's a podcast out there for anything. That's one of the things I've always said about podcasting, man. I don't care what your passion is. There's a podcast for it, probably. And if not, you should create one in that space, if you have a passion and can't find a podcast about it. So that's cool, man, to think that people are downloading podcasts. Are you talking about, customer service in the electrical world, basically? That's really a summary of what it's about?
Yeah. I mean, we touch on automation and power, things like that, but it's really, or cybersecurity. So it covered a bunch of different topics, but it's 2 themes. We have idea episodes where we talk about the ideas of industry, and then we have hero episodes, and they're actually just people's stories. How did you get started in industry? What have you, lessons you've learned, advice, mentors, things like that. So it's been pretty cool. And to your point on the role, I think I've had 4 or 5 roles at Eco where they created a role because, I expressed interest in, hey, I think I can serve the company well here. And they're like, well, I'm not sure what this actually is. So let's write the job description. So I actually write job descriptions. And that's happened like 3 or 4 times to where, okay, here a role was created because there was a need that I identified. And I kind of went after it to see because I thought it would help the company, and it's worked out.
I love that. And again, there's a lesson there for our primary audience, which is pastors, and that is create your future, man. Like create the role that you desire. You see something you want to do, go after it, create it, get outside the box of what, is traditionally acceptable or thought of. And, don't wait around for the world to come and ask you for something. Go create it, make it happen. So I love that, man. I admire that initiative that you're taking. So is that your primary role then, is to create a podcast, or is that just one of many things you're doing there for the company?
Well, right now it's transitioning more to marketing. So I'm doing we're going through a new website design, e-commerce platform. So I'm doing a lot of writing, kind of more technical type writing, website design type information, blogs. But the podcast is definitely one of those vehicles. But really, they're really trying to get me more into the content creation and development to support our sales and our customers and the things that they're wanting that we can serve them with in the future. So I just finished writing a story brand for the company. So I went through a process of that. So that's going to, kind of shift a lot of our messaging on how we actually bring things to market. So it's not about us. It's about making our customers the hero and trying to put everything that we write to address it that way.
So, Chris, does that mean that the content that you're creating, is that to establish the company more as an influencer and build up that credibility, or do they want that content to actually lead to sources of revenue for the company itself?
Yes. So
right.
It's really
that's
both.
unusual for a company to do that, to kind of get away from their primary product or service.
Right. Well, we're trying to do more like demand generation type stuff. So we will create content and material that serves, because you never know where people are in their buying cycle. But
Right.
so if you're creating stuff that serves them while they're doing their research, and you are establishing yourself along the way as an influencer, as you mentioned, through the podcasts and blogs and tools and case studies and all that stuff, when they get ready to make a transition to actually procure something, you'll be in a much better position to serve them at that point, and you may be closer to the top of mind. So it's really all encompassing, but yeah, it's trying to keep that focus on serving. I preach this over and over. We just got to focus on who we're serving and what problems we're helping them solve. If we just focus on that, the rest of it will take care of itself.
Yep.
Chris, one of the dots I kind of want to connect here for pastors is that we have kind of 3 broad pathways that we encourage pastors to go down. And one of them is what we call the information-based pathway, which is essentially that. It's using your voice and your information, your intellectual knowledge to create content and serve people out of that and build a profitable business around it. Well, you're showing another way of doing that. There's lots of ways of doing that. And we'll get into the platform that you're building here in a moment under your own name, your own brand. But you're doing this for a company, and I just want to connect some dots for some pastors listening who may say, well, I don't really want to have a podcast. I don't have anything I'm specifically passionate about that I would want to launch a podcast around. Or how do you get paid to do a podcast? Well, this is a creative way of doing that. How many pastors are in a position to be gifted to come alongside of a company? And even if it's not really something that is in their wheelhouse necessarily, but to say, look, I have a voice, I'm a good communicator, I know how to effectively craft a message and share it. What would it look like for me to be a content creator for your organization? And, again, I'm not saying it should be everyone's path, but it is a path for some people to consider. So if you know of, local companies or someone in your regional market there, they might be waiting, and they don't even know they need you, pastor. Like, you need to go to them and say, hey, you could use someone like me doing the very thing that I heard this guy named Chris on the EntrePastors podcast is doing. I can do that for your company. So I just wanted to connect that dot for those that might be listening. So that's what you're doing in your day job. Anything else, Les, you want to ask around that, or Chris, anything else you want to say about that before we move on?
I'll just say this, for the pastors listening too, you have what's called SMEs at a lot of companies. They're subject matter experts. Many times subject matter experts are not good communicators. So if you can be the bridge from a subject matter expert to the end user, right? The customer, whoever you're trying to serve, you just created a ton of value for that company. And as a pastor, as you mentioned, Jon, you're a great communicator, but you're also pretty good listeners. You're able to discern, and that's what you need to do. So like a content creator, for instance, if you could just get into where you sit down and interview subject matter experts and understand how they, what their product or service or solution, how that impacts others. And then you can actually translate that into maybe a case study or a blog or an article. That's going to provide so much value, or a small little video. Companies eat that alive, and they because it serves, and they struggle with it so much. But I think there's skill sets in the pastoral world that would be greatly benefit and help bridge that gap there.
I love
That's
that.
good. Yeah, that's really good.
Good stuff. Well, all right. So now, in addition to that, so here's what I'm kind of assuming is the trajectory. You start doing this within your company. You create this podcast. You're 200 episodes in. I know, as a fellow podcaster, that is no small feat. The average podcast, they say, goes about 7 episodes and then dies because people just quit, contributing content there. So you're 200 episodes in with the corporate one that you're doing.
Yes, sir.
And then I'm assuming that through that you saw, hey, I can do this. Like I'm kind of learning the ropes of how to run a podcast, and now you're launching your own. So tell us about that. Tell us about this new platform that you have rolled out and what the heart behind it is. And I'm going to ask you some questions around that.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. So, I mean, and the end of last year, he just came to me. He's like, all right, now you've learned this skill. You've proven you can do it. Use it for me. So I met with my wife, told her where I was thinking. My partner, who helps me at my primary job, who does the podcast editing and kind of like the executive producer, he's also a believer. We're strong brothers together. And I was telling him my idea. He's like, I want in, because I want to help. So he and we came together, and I was like, all right, I'll do the content creation and generation and all the stuff that I do at Eco. And if you can just help me with that website and the editing and the stuff that, I don't know how to do a lot of it, and the stuff I do know how to do, I don't really enjoy. So he's like, I'm here for you, and so we decided to go all in and create a podcast that serves Christian men. And as a dad who has 3 girls at the house, I've been asked, why did you create a podcast serving Christian men when you're surrounded by women? And I said, well, because God has a sense of humor, is all I can tell you, so it just worked out. But I also believe that I have an opportunity to speak to future son-in-laws. So that could be something there. And so we launched it in January of this year. We do the structure of the line within us is ultimately we're trying to help Christian men be the leaders they're predestined to be, and we're trying to open their eyes and give them confidence to walk in the areas of health, wealth, and self. That's kind of the 3 buckets. So we built Bible studies, courses. I got some small groups going on, doing some public speaking, just trying to really for this year build up trust and credibility and resources to hopefully launch like a community at some point in the future, probably 2023. But the show drops 3 times a week. We drop on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday is a spiritual kickoff where I just go through a little scripture and kind of talk about, what it means to me and try to how we can apply this to our life. Wednesday is our interview, or is it either interview or solo episode where I'm going deep into a topic. And then Friday, we wrap it up with a fun Friday that kind of ties it all together. And some dad jokes, some tips, things like that to have a little bit of fun. But it's been a lot of work, but we've also seen incredible success with this one. It outpaced our other show that we've been doing for 2 years. I think within 60 days, it was just, It was crazy. And then we have guests and content scheduled for this entire calendar year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's just like, I just recorded like episode 100 a couple weeks ago. We haven't got to that in our release schedule, but I've recorded it, and it's just, God is just moving, man. So it's been phenomenal.
Man, I love so much about that. You just jumping in and building this thing. What have been some of the challenges of getting this thing off the ground? Like, what are some things you're running into that maybe other people need to know about, or that you're personally struggling with? What are
Well,
some challenges?
a lot of it is just the time. Is there just people think, well, if you have a podcast, it's just you're just talking to people. But yeah, that's like the smallest part of the whole deal is the actual conversation. So there's time, because if you want to promote it and try to do to get it out in front of the right people, there's things to do there. Ultimately understanding what resources we need to build to serve the listeners. So we're that takes a lot of time and effort. I wrote a Bible study that was a pretty massive project, an undertaking. Then I turned that into a video course. I wrote an ebook around personal finance, and I turned that into an e-course. So I mean, there's these things where you think they're small and they're simple. They just take a lot of time. So you have to be dedicated. You have to really know your why. You have to have a real clear vision. And then, ultimately where we're trying to get to is this is what I want to do. I mean, I want to be able to do this as my full time and provide for my family. So we haven't got to that monetization piece yet. God is still hasn't revealed that whole plan, but we know we're doing the right things and we're serving others. And at some point, the pieces of the puzzle will start coming together, and then we'll be off to the races.
So that is the vision then, long term, is to monetize this thing and turn it into a full-time source of income for you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And I heard you say courses and a membership community, speaking. I mean, really, that is the epitome of what we call the information-based pathway. It's taking a message and packaging it in various ways that fit how you have been shaped and wired by God. So, and a lot of those dovetail together, in the information space. I mean, public speaking, podcasting, writing, coaching, live events. So all of the above. Not that you have to do all of those, but that's a very easy way to just kind of take the same message and package it in different formats and venues to reach different people and, build new streams of revenue. So
yes, sir. You
just launched this then last year. Did I hear you say that?
Yeah, January this year. So we're recording in July. So 7 months we've had it out.
Going in. So you're really not too far behind where Les and I are with this particular platform. I mean, we're closing in on 12 months here, probably around the time that this is being released.
Okay.
So yeah, man. Well, we wish you well with that. Les, you got anything else? Any other questions or anything you want to know?
I was just wondering, a lot of the people that are listening to this, that'll be focusing on that information-based path. The growth is so organic that it's almost natural just to do the thing and see what happens. So as you fast forward, do you have in your mind some mileposts or things to sort of measure along the way of where you'd like to be in 2 years, 3 years? And then how have you, reverse engineered that? I think we know you well enough to know that you think like an engineer, and that's what an engineer does. So have your engineering skills been brought into this world to kind of build that roadmap?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, just creating a show like this and to be able to be consistent with it, a lot of engineering comes in just to develop the process. So, we've got that down. We're fine tuning that because it takes, as you guys know, just takes a lot of effort to make it happen. But
sure,
we have some monetary milestones that goals, if you will, that are in place for my wife and I. And at that point, we'll know, if we have, X dollars coming in per month, and we've seen that consistently for, let's say, 3 months. That's a lot easier to make that transition and go full time and lean in it versus just burning the ships and hoping that it works. So we definitely want to take the right step. We have our son is due in November, so we have some other dynamics going on too. So I can't do anything too herky jerky, if you will. I want to definitely take the steps, but I also don't want to put God in a box. So at some point, if God says, Chris, you need to go ahead and trust me here, son, I'm going to do it. But right now he's just telling me build. Just keep
I like
building.
that. One thing I would encourage our audience in general is we all romanticize the story of that flying leap of faith off a cliff where if God doesn't catch us, we splat at the bottom. And, I think it's like the story in scripture where Peter gets out of the boat and walks on water. As I've preached that before, I always say, like, if God hasn't invited you to step out of the boat, it's a pretty good idea to stay in the boat, in the middle of a storm. But if Jesus says, come to me on the water, then get out of the boat. But sometimes I think we blame God for our own, impatience, and we rush ahead and make decisions, maybe jump into things, and then ask God to clean up the mess. And I just challenge our audience in general, don't put that much pressure on your side hustle or your passion, this project of launching a platform like that if you just jump off the cliff and you have to pay groceries out of this and pay your mortgage out of this, like it puts immediate pressure, takes all the joy and fun out of it right away. And I like that approach better of letting it build, taking steps of measured faith. And when the time comes, then jump. Sure. I'm all about the jump, but make sure God's truly inviting you to take that leap before you do it. So
the devil tried to do that with Jesus and the temptations, didn't he? And Jesus passed.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I don't think I will.
I'm curious from your guys' standpoint, I tell guys sometimes, God will tell us yes, but then we also need to make sure he tells us go, and actually move. So is there, it sounds like that's aligning to what you guys are saying. For me, I feel like God's telling me, okay, this is what you need to do, learn these skills, keep growing, keep developing, but I haven't got that go yet to where I need to just say, okay, this is what we're doing full time. So I'd love some advice from you guys on that.
Well, what comes to my mind is simply just another take a step. So often we want to have the whole path laid out in front of us, or again, we just jump right to what we think is the end game. And in some cases, just take a step, because it's until we take that step, we don't see the next one, come into full view. And so it's taking deliberate steps of action forward. Something I've often counseled people, and I hope this is good advice, because I often, pray a silent prayer like, Lord, help me, give me wisdom in saying what I'm about to say. But, there's a lot of places we can go for wisdom and godly counsel. But I say when I'm in those moments of decision in my life and I'm asking God and I don't feel like I'm hearing a clear yes or no, sometimes I will say to the Lord, this is what I'm going to do. I'm giving you all the room to speak, and you can speak through my wife. You can speak through your word. You can speak through prayer. You can speak through all the ways that you talk to me. I'm listening. But if I don't hear from you, God, then I'm going to move in this direction. And, so far that has never really failed me when I've made decisions with that formula. And I've encouraged others down that same road. If they're like, man, I don't know if I should do this or do that, run it by God and tell him what's on your heart. And if he's not clearly speaking, then just let him know what direction you think you're going to head. And he's faithful. He'll speak if that's the wrong path. So I don't know if any of that's helpful, but that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, think of it this way. He wants to reveal his will to you and to me more than we want to know it. Just like a loving father, just like you would, or even more so than you would to your kids, even in the matter of what we ask God for. Jesus said, who's going to have their kid ask for a fish and give them a serpent?
Right.
So you delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Some people, when they're applying that verse, forget the first part. So when you walk with him, if you're walking down the road with your wife, she doesn't have to yell at you. You're right there. She can just turn aside and speak to you and you can hear her. But if you're not walking together, that's a challenge.
Yes, sir. Thank you both.
Yeah. I'm going to say one more thing I love that verse, that delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart, Psalm 37:4. And one thing that we've helped, it was in a coaching conversation that Les and I did with one of our guys in our community, that as we were talking about some things and helping him weigh his options moving forward, I heard myself say something that as long as you're delighting yourself in the Lord, you can trust the desires of your heart. And it kind of hit me in that moment. I was like, that's really good. Like, I felt like that was from the Holy Spirit, that because a lot of times in, the false humility rises up and we say, well, I can't trust. If I wanted, it must be wrong. You know, it must be a bad thing if it's something I want. Well, if you're walking with God and delighting yourself in the Lord, lean into those desires, because I would contend God has put some of those desires in your heart and he wants to give them to you. What an amazing thought that he actually wants to give us the things that we desire, so long as we are walking with him and putting him at the center of our life. That kind of helps us stay in that healthy context of not just using God as this cosmic slot machine to put a new BMW in my driveway every time I ask him for it. So anyway, good stuff, man. These are great questions to wrestle with. I thought of something maybe we could, as we wrap up this interview. First of all, I have one last question before we wrap up the interview and go backstage. But when we do go backstage, here's kind of what I'm thinking, Chris. Is I want to maybe drill down deeper into a little part of your story, not just about how to start a podcast, but you said something that caught my attention when you said that, you know, in less than a year's time, you've already outpaced the audience that you've had in this other podcast. And I want to know how you did that, or what advice would you give to someone who does not have an audience right now? That's one of the scary parts of launching a podcast or anything when you have no followers.
Right.
How do you get started in that? So if you don't mind backstage having that conversation with us, does that sound like something you could speak to?
Absolutely.
Cool. So then the last question for this part of the interview, if someone wanted to connect with you, see more about the Lion Within and the podcast you're doing there, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just thelionwithin.us. So we call it thelionwithin.us, and go check us out there. It is a really simple way to join the Lion's Den. That's on the main page. It's free. Pop your email in. Anytime I get somebody that joins the Lion's Den, we had a couple guys join this morning, actually, before this recording. I always take, and I'm going to record a personal message, like on my phone. I'm going to send it to you, and then I'm going to actually open up a conversation for us to talk. And I've done this with so many guys. The group's really growing because I actually want to have a connection and have a conversation versus just have an email. I want to be able to see, how can I serve you? What do you find value in the Lion Within us? What do we need to be thinking about to build in the future to serve you as well? So the lionwithin.us is the best way to connect and go from there.
Love it, man. Good stuff. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure connecting with you, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show, and we will see you backstage in just a minute.
Yes, sir.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.